Hey, it's Dan Gilmore, Chief Marketing Officer at Softeon. We're a supply chain software company. Very pleased to lead this session, educational session here at ProMat 2021, a virtual conference on WMS 2021. That was then, and this is now. I hope you enjoyed. This broadcast was actually pre-recorded, so I'm available at the chat window. You should see nearby the video screen here. Just enter your questions, and I'll gather up, or I'll answer as many of them as I can as the presentation moves on. We'll also note the Softeon is in the exhibitor hall. If you want to come and stop by our virtual booth sometime during the course of this week, and there'll be more opportunities to chat to get your questions answered, as well as materials, white papers, brochures, collateral, things of that nature. So certainly hope to see you then. And going to get right to it. A lot of ground to cover, so I'm gonna move it at a brisk pace. But hope you enjoy it. I've given this before to pretty good ratings. So just a little bit about Softeon, the company. We're a supply chain software company focused on supply chain execution. That's notably in our warehouse management solution. You see there on the right, all of these solutions were built in-house on one common platform, one data model, one architecture. That's why we use this kind of Lego type of looking diagram, because it truly is plug and play amongst all of the solutions in our portfolio. Warehouse management is supported with things like yard management and transportation management, assembly and kitting, slotting optimization, 3PL billing, what we call resource management, which is labor management. You get the idea. They all work together very smoothly and easily. We also have warehouse execution. We'll talk a little bit about that today, as well as something called distributed order management in terms of optimal order sourcing for e-commerce and beyond. But it's a pretty broad portfolio of solutions. Usual kind of logo slide, just so you have some idea of who our customers are. I'm not going to spend any particular time on this, other than to say we have proof points in virtually every vertical, and a good mix of both very large companies as well as more medium-sized firms as well. So it's kind of interesting, the first real-time WMS is generally believed to have been implemented at JCPenney in 1975. So that's what, 45 years old, something like that? I guess 47 years old now, or 46. But yet, despite that, the warehouse management market is remaining very active, very hot. And what's going on? Well, there's a lot of facilities being built. You think about it, every time a WMS or a facility is opened up, it's in a sense an opportunity for a new provider. And the warehouse market, as you may be aware, has been growing extremely rapidly for many years now, and seems to be projected to continue that mode in the future. A lot of companies experiencing very fast sales growth, and that sometimes stretches existing systems and can't get the customer service you need anymore. A lot of significant logistics strategy changes that's partly embracing of e-fulfillment and e-commerce, but other changes as well. Every time there's a lot of consolidation going on. When companies consolidate facilities, they often from one business unit to another, they often look at, okay, we need a new system that's going to be able to handle the requirements of both those businesses that are being combined. A lot of interest in DC automation that also often requires a new WMS. Distribution costs continue to rise, and labor situations and all of that stuff pushing people to WMS. A lot of companies still have very old. I'm amazed at how many old systems you still find out there. I mean, very old, 1990s style type systems still out there. And sometimes you wind up with often called a burning platform, some mandate for change. I talked about omni-channel fulfillment requirements, and there's a lot of interest in moving to a cloud-based solution. We're going to talk about that today as well. So good market for WMS providers, and you may be in the market as well. That could be why you're here today. But I'd say, over the last 20 years, we really have only had incremental WMS improvement capabilities. And that's not to say there hasn't been development in WMS. They have. Certainly what's true today is that 20 years ago and 10 years ago, things that often required customization no longer require customization. It's in the base packages, configurable, et cetera. But, the fundamental, approach of WMS and what a WMS does really has not changed all that much over a fairly long horizon. I think the market is ready for something a little bit new, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, I could have actually expanded this, but I only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to just say there's 5 things I'm going to look at: a transition going on from on-premise to cloud, powerful megatrend, from traditional configuration to smart wizards and templates, from difficult materials handling systems integration, taking too long of a time, to more of a plug-and-play model, from just WMS by itself and some of those other modules I talked about, but to WMS plus WES. There's amazing things going on there. And from a different, perspective of from, kind of RF or desktop screens to more voice interface. I think you'll find that very interesting as well. So that's what we're going to go through today. So, the move from on-premise to the cloud, WMS got a little bit of a late start to cloud compared to some other applications like transportation management, visibility, and things of that nature. There's a variety of reasons for that, but one of the big ones was, underlying concerns about latency of, sub-second processes like RF or voice or materials handling, communications, etc. But I'm going to tell you that I think that those concerns are largely overblown. At least if you architected the system to optimize traffic and performance from cloud to the distribution center. There's all kinds of reasons software is moving to the cloud, including WMS. Certainly just results in faster implementation times, faster time to value. You can have somebody else manage the system for you rather than committing scarce IT resources internally. Portability, you move from one facility to another. You can just kind of take the cloud with you, if you will. You can hopefully have one cloud solution that scales from very simple facilities to medium to more complex if you've got a disparate network. And we're just finding a tremendously high level of customer satisfaction because the implementation is so easy technically compared to the on-premise model. And just the managed services that we or other vendors can provide to take just care of almost everything for you has just really been well received by our customer base. So this is where software is heading generally, and it's certainly where WMS is heading. Talking about those latency concerns, because it makes sense to be worried about those things, but we've done dozens of cloud implementations now and really have found that performance is rarely an issue. Somewhat surprisingly, we thought it might be more of an issue when we first got into this a number of years ago, but we're just not seeing it today. And we do have an approach that, and maybe others do as well, not sure, but if there is really time-sensitive stuff that for some reason we think there's a problem, we can deploy what we call a local agent to handle just that part of the communication. So buffer some stuff into materials handling or to voice or whatever, in case, just to shave off a few milliseconds to get you the speed you need. But again, we just don't see the requirement at all, or very little, and hence that's why this is growing. This cloud model, let's be clear on this, is I firmly believe is just about the only way software is going to be delivered over the next 5 years. I mean, within 5 years, it's about the only way you're going to be able to get it, unless you're in government deployment or something like that that has special security requirements. But this is where it's all headed, and it makes it a lot easier and a lot better for customers. Number 2, from traditional configuration to use of templates and wizards to transform WMS deployments. Let's face it, WMS deployments all these years later still remain too hard, too costly, often too risky, and frequently just frankly a lot of pain. There's initial, the deployment time, it often takes too long. And second, what is the time to value? When do you really get ramped up and getting your productivity gains back from where you were to start with? Is there a better way? The WMS vendors as a community have tried things like templates and stuff a number of times in the past, and they've just never quite worked out. But now there's some new approaches that not only reduce the cost and the efforts of that deployment, reduce the pain, but also can even help you to prevent mistakes. And what I'm talking about there is what we call a configuration wizard. You see kind of an example of it here, probably not that easy to see on the screen, but I'll explain what I'm showing you here. But basically, you start with or create some kind of reference template. That could reference template. That could be by industry, or it could be something you build yourself for facilities across your network. So, for example, we're working with one opportunity right now that has 2 basic types of distribution centers, and they've got a number of them across the U.S. So we're building 2 reference templates, one for each type of DC. And there you define all the things that are going to be the same for each DC that is of that kind that can be served by that template. And so that can just go straight into the configuration. But then what we do is we set up all the things that need to be changed or configured for each individual facility. And the amazing thing is, it's almost like a TurboTax style tax interview where it walks you through all the information that you need to collect or configure. It keeps track of what you've done. It keeps track of what you haven't done. If you've made a mistake, if you put one value in this part of the application and another value in some other part of the wizard, it's going to tell you these are incompatible or won't let you do it or whatever, which has been kind of a source point for me in the WMS business for a long time. So this really has the potential to make some major improvements. It's ideal for companies that have multiple facilities or 3PLs or otherwise that have multiple clients or customers. It takes a lot of the time and effort out of the setup for those new facilities and those things. That's just really the way it ought to be, right? More of that kind of approach to configuration than the way we've seen it for pretty much the whole history of the WMS market. Number three, from difficult materials handling integration to more of a plug and play type model. There's no question that there's a lot of interest in materials handling technologies. Some of those are, high level of automation, highly robotic, goods to person systems, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also a lot of interest in kind of mid level automation, things like voice. It's not really materials handling, but it kind of gets lumped in there. Smart carts, pick to light, put walls, mobile robots, et cetera. I think the current approach is very limited. The basic thing is that each of these subsystems comes with its own software, and you kind of throw the orders over the wall and they do their thing and try to send the acknowledgments back. There's a lot of disadvantages to that I'm going to talk about in a second. And the time to implement these things is often many, many months when it should be more like weeks, right? And so I think a better way has emerged. And this is what I talked about here. If you look at these different technologies, each have their own, control system and order release logic, and frankly operate somewhat in their own little silos. So the issues with that is, first off, it makes the hardware that goes with it very expensive because it's not just the pure hardware. It's kind of bundled in that hardware with the software that is needed to run it. You can't really optimize end-to-end processes because you only have a little bit of information. How do you handle replenishments in these systems? How do you handle exceptions? Very difficult. And again, these subsystems wind up kind of operating in their own little silos. They're not all communicating to each other. Instead of benefiting from improved decision making, from fully utilizing all the information that's available in the WMS. And it does limit flexibility and exception management, as I just said there a second ago. So, is there a better way? We think so. And that is to be able to directly connect with these kind of devices and systems at an API level. Forget the need for additional software to make these run. So we have our own voice solution, just for example. It's just a downloadable app that works on any Android device. But for things like smart cards, pick to light, these things I talked about, you don't need any third-party software. And that means these things can operate on a single platform and benefit again from the rich information and that's available in the WMS to make the optimal decision about all kinds of different things. If you look at mobile robots, for example, we do support multiple robot types from different vendors in the same one platform. So you could have 10 robots from vendor A and 15 robots from vendor B, and we're going to assign the right robot depending on the task type, and because there's different cart configurations and missions in the DC, et cetera, et cetera. So this just gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility, and it allows us to implement these systems in a much more condensed period of time, and provides that flexibility to add new technologies very easy. We have one customer that added one put wall, they liked it. Then they added 9 more. They liked it some more. Then they added 20 more put walls. And this all happened over the course of a relatively short period of time. And that mobile robot flexibility, next 2 years from now, there's going to be a better robot from some new vendor. You're going to want to add them. Well, you can keep the robots you've got if you want, and just bring these new robots into the system. Will all operate under one platform. I think this is really the future of where these integrations are going to go because of the flexibility and cost advantage. So number 4, and I'm covering a lot of ground here, I realize, but from WMS alone to just WMS plus warehouse execution systems. Warehouse execution systems have been around for a while, but they're still relatively unknown. What's happening is the WES is moving. It's very much been targeted at just heavily automated DCs. It does a job there, but it also can be used in manual or mid-level automation DCs. And so what I think you're going to see in the right scenarios, it's not for everybody. If you're too small or your operations aren't that complex, but you're going to see an opportunity to have a warehouse management and execution system as one solution that addresses a number of different problems. Core to those capabilities are the ability to do simulation and optimization and orchestration at a level that's just not available even in very advanced tier 1 WMSs. This really is a true step change in WMS capabilities, extended WMS capabilities, and driving us to this new era of what Gartner calls the autonomous warehouse management system. So, what's in a WES? Well, a number of different things. We'll kind of only cover the highlights today, but real-time visibility to throughput bottlenecks and events within the distribution center, being able to provide very advanced configurable optimization for things like order batching and release, order picking, replenishment, all in just a event-aware or a condition-aware environment. We'll talk about that in a second. Workload balancing to maximize the flow of goods through and into various equipments and human processes, because really, case pickers in a pick module are a system just like an automated piece of equipment is. The difference just is you can expand the capacity up and down a little bit easier by adding or taking away bodies. So, how do I synchronize all of that across the building? And this is that autonomous warehouse part I talked about, automated order release based on service level commitments, shipping schedules, carrier cutoff times, real-time condition monitoring, and more. We'll come back to that in a second. And then use of simulation to plan, replan, and dynamically allocate resources. We'll talk about a little bit about that too, I believe, as well. So what is the value proposition fundamentally of WES? Well, it enables companies to meet customer demand and service commitments at least possible cost. Now, could I automate that process and drive the cost down? Of course. What I'm talking about is for right now, for today, for this task, what's the most effective way to get that task done, meeting any constraints that I have? Second, it significantly shrinks the gap between what I like to call the theoretical capacity or throughput of a whole building or a individual function, and reduces that gap hopefully to nothing, but if not all the way to nothing, to a very small delta. We just recently had a phone call with a major apparel supplier that is just kind of the flow of goods in the building is just not working. They have all kinds of automation, but they're kind of like constipated right now in terms of all these different processes and the inability to sync those up. This is what WES offers the opportunity to do for both manual or for both automated and non-automated facilities in a very powerful way. And it does provide that single system for management and control fulfillment across the entire distribution center. Get rid of the silos. So just some, modest examples of that here. This is just an example of, that real-time visibility to throughput and bottlenecks that I talked about here. It's just an example dashboard, very detailed, very powerful. The key point here is that not only are these metrics and KPIs and monitors, useful for managers and supervisors to keep everything on steady state, but actually it's the same data that the WES uses with the WMS to make those smart, intelligent decisions, working on the same data in a more systemic way, a systematic way. So it's powerful capabilities to really understand what's going on and react very quickly if any problems or bottlenecks should start to erupt, and to synchronize activities across different fulfillment processes in the order. There's lots of dependencies, right? The put wall may be dependent on the throughput of the piece picking operation or the case picking operation. And so all of these need to be considered in a more holistic type of fashion. And here's just another example. It's showing, each of these different zones, in the distribution center. This is just kind of a made up example. The data's no good, but just shows you the power of the kind of dashboards that WES can provide in terms of where things stand in terms of your operation. And I talked about leveraging that awareness of throughput activity and bottlenecks in terms of order picking. That's exactly what you see here. You see all these different, what we call pick routes, different ways that orders can be picked in the facility, where the inventory comes from, what resources are available, what the replenishment tasks are, what the cutoff times are, those kind of things I talked about there. And you can dynamically readjust these based on conditions on the floor. So if you have multiple paths, say a put wall path and a regular cart pick path to fulfill the same order, and you'd prefer to go to the put wall, but the put wall is congested right now, or some other upstream or downstream process is congested, then I can temporarily, at least maybe for the rest of the shift, reroute orders that would have gone through the put wall and put them to go through the regular old cart pick, at least until the congestion clears up. So very cool set of capabilities here to just have that smart warehouse in terms of release of work to the floor. So what for you in terms of benefits? Well, we're seeing double-digit improvements in labor productivity with WMS plus WES, significant reduction in supervisory overhead, much better managed and reduced overtime hours, closing that gap between the theoretical and actual that I talked about a second ago, easily and quickly evaluate and deploy those new subsystems, consistently meet service commitments with little chaos. There's so much chaos in many DCs now as the clock is ticking to the FedEx truck leaving at 4:30. This autonomous WMS process automatically releases work considering all of those examples and making sure that all of the products, the work is released in time to make it on that 4:30 truck, and to do so systemically again without human need to be looking at all kinds of orders and replenishments, whatever, trying to figure out how we're going to make this to happen. And then you're going to ultimately wind up with if you have materials handling equipment, better utilization, more consistent flow of work, which in a new facility may allow you to either reduce the amount of equipment that is required, maybe less diverse than you would have otherwise, or you can just get more throughput out of the same size system. So a lot of different benefits there. And again, I want to stress the importance that this is applicable not just for automated environments where WES kind of grew up, but also for manual and hybrid DCs as well. And we'll just note, relevant to that, last April, UPS issued a press release talking about how they're building the smart warehouse of the future on their new Softeon WMS plus WES, as you see featured here in the headline from Logistics Management Magazine. I talk to many customers and say, we'd like to build the smart warehouse of the future for you as well. And last, we're moving from just the screen interface, whether it's a handheld device or whether it's a desktop terminal, to more of a voice interface. And so, first off, we're seeing a great use of voice beyond just regular order picking. So the native way that we've developed the voice, we have clients doing using voice for pallet building, coming out of Diverge, for truck loading, for a number of other applications. So start broadening your horizon beyond just order picking. In terms of how voice and hands-free might benefit the productivity there, and if you've got the system that's architected right to add it to these other areas is very easy, frankly. And so the first thing you're seeing beyond order picking in terms of this what Gartner calls conversational voice is starting with being able to get metrics and statuses through a phone, your smartphone, supervisor's or manager's smartphone, rather than going to a computer screen. And second, it's going to evolve into more of a full-blown dialogue. So here you just see some different examples of, how you might do some of those queries. And this is real stuff. This isn't futuristic. This is what we're doing right now. So, and I do believe that over time, voice is going to be the primary way many users interact with the entire WMS system. So you see your one supervisor, colon, that's just made up quote, but of course, I need a replenishment for location, that number. Or where are we on that last wave? I mean, we're already doing these kind of queries now, and it's going to grow into much more full-blown dialogue, I think, over the next 3 to 5 years, where we're going to hardly recognize the way that we interact with the WMS as we do it today. So I think I managed to get through it in relatively fast order there. We're now going to open it up for some questions. If you type in your question at the chat window, and I'll be sitting there monitoring those both during the course of the broadcast and now that we're wrapping up here. You see on the screen how to get a hold of me or how to get more information relative to Softeon, and we'll note our weekly or bi-weekly Logistics Insight podcast, very informative, just 3 to 4 minutes long, and available on all the sites, your favorite podcast sites, the Apple Store, the Google Podcasts, and I think iHeartMedia, all the different places to get your favorite podcast. So certainly enjoyed having you here on board today. A note again, we'll be over in the exhibit hall at the Softeon booth for the allotted show hours. I'd love to talk with you there, and if we don't make it there, then certainly give us a jingle. Would love to talk to you. Saw my email there, how to get a hold of me. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the show.